And here in part 2 of the New Orleans arrest of Lee Harvey Oswald, the uncharacteristically extensive documentation of Oswald's arrest continues. We have 2 amateur movies which document the event to some extent. An amazing circumstance, I think, that 2 amateur movies have surfaced showing Oswald apparently at his arrest in New Orleans. And both of these, I'm going to play a clip from the was it Frontline or was it Nova? I think it was Nova. Frontline, I think. A documentary on the life of Lee Harvey Oswald. And they, in the narration here, they talk as if it's one film by one amateur photographer, but they use the footage from both films, and as if it's one.
Amateur movie maker filmed the angry Cubans as they surrounded Oswald.
At that time, I get angry, and I was approaching Oswald trying to punch him in the face. When he saw that I was approaching and he sensed my intention, he put his arm down and he said to me, "Okay, Carlos, if you want to hit me, hit me." Immediately, I realized that he wanted to appear as a victim, as a martyr.
When one of the Cubans took the pro-Castro leaflets and threw them on the ground, the police arrested Oswald and 8 Cubans for disturbing the peace.
And the first film that I'll talk about is the one taken by John T. Martin. If you're familiar with the JFK assassination case, you know there is another John Martin who took another film of the assassination itself in Dealey Plaza. This John Martin is said to be from Minnesota, and John T. Martin also is said to be from Minnesota. What a nice happenstance that is. Now, of course, John is a very common name, and Martin is a very common name. But JFK assassination photographers coming from Minnesota with the same name are somewhat unusual, I think, and worth noting, though I cannot prove any connection. And we don't have any FBI reports of interviews with John T. Martin, so I'm going to use this, whatever it is. I got this off the internet. It doesn't say where it's from, here anyway, on this page, and I don't remember. So I'm sorry, whoever you are who did this. Maybe it looks like, well, I'm not going to speculate. It comes from somebody. I'm going to read the highlighted areas. Martin traveled to Dallas in August 1963 and visited Major General Edwin Walker. Walker is the right-wing kook general, and apparently John T. Martin was a fanboy. The first part of Martin's film shows scenes of the outside of Walker's house, including the broken window through which the bullet had been fired. Now, this, of course, the official story is that Oswald fired that bullet. So, John T. Martin, on his trip, visits Major General Walker, whom Oswald supposedly shot at. After visiting Dallas, Martin traveled to New Orleans and filmed some local landmarks. On August 9th, while walking on Canal Street, he witnessed an altercation among several men, one of whom was handing out pro-Castro hands-off Cuba leaflets. Martin filmed a few seconds of police officers taking the men into squad cars, followed by footage of torn leaflets on the sidewalk. Now, there are no... Oh, I said that already. Further down here it says, further inspection reveals the film is not the original, but a copy of a copy. So what? Martin says the film, now in the museum's collection... Oh, this is from the 6th floor museum, I think. Is the film the FBI returned to him in 1964, but inspection shows the film's date code shows 1977. The film was borrowed by the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the late 1970s, and its records stored at the National Archives. Now, what this means is that the film we have as the original Martin film is actually something that was printed or copied in 1977, after, I think, Grodin would have got his hands on it. And, well, let's not get off the subject too much. The important thing to note is that this isn't really the original Martin film. It's a copy of a copy that Martin himself said came back from the FBI edited. That's what Harold Weisberg said, that Martin had told him that the film he got back from the FBI had been edited. Now I grabbed this particular frame because it was clear, and it shows you that on the film, John T. Martin was at General Walker's house in Dallas. And then after some views from an airplane, apparently they're in New Orleans here, looking at a seal, a New Orleans seal. And then I think this is called probably Lafayette Place. I don't know, that looks like it must be Lafayette up there. And then here, Lafayette Place on the top of the frame, and Oswald's arrest on the bottom. This is a splice in the film. It could be nothing else. That is, the film just taken from the camera couldn't have made this frame. You wouldn't have part of one frame and part of another like that. It wouldn't look like that. So this must be the FBI edit beginning. Here it has been, the following footage was spliced into this. From where? Who knows? Presumably from Martin's own film. But I thought I should show that as proof that this film has been altered. And then we get what purports to be Oswald's arrest. And it looks pretty good. It looks like it might be Oswald's arrest and the torn up leaflets. Now, I'm not aware of anyone purporting to have the original Doyle film, but Frontline must have got it somewhere because they combined it with the Martin film on their TV show here. So I guess we're supposed to assume that whatever Frontline shows here that isn't the Martin film is the Doyle film. As I understand it, that is the state of this photographic evidence. Now, as I said before, we don't have any FBI reports of interviews with John T. Martin, but we have 4 FBI reports of interviews with the Doyles and their friends who were with them. There are actually 5 people present. The photographer was a 14-year-old boy, and apparently there's no report of the FBI talking with him. These are all from late November, after the assassination, and they're all tell the same story pretty much. And what interests me is that they all say at about 4 o'clock this happened. All the statements say at about 4 o'clock. And if this is the FBI, and remember, the FBI they didn't do this with the Martin film. They didn't interview anybody, or they didn't write up a report of any interview. But here they do 4 interviews, which is a bit overkill. I mean, I'm not complaining that they are thorough here, but this is uncharacteristic of the FBI's investigation, that they interview everybody who was there, except the photographer, of course. You never know what a 14-year-old boy might say. But each one of them says at about 4 o'clock this happened. So naturally, that makes me suspicious that this did not happen at about 4 o'clock. And, of course, the arrest report has an altered time. Well, what do you know? This is the best quality version of this document I could find. It originates from the Warren Commission report, or from the 26 volumes. To me, it looks like it originally said 3:15 and that somebody typed a 4 over the 3. So given the fact that the FBI is saying 4 times in uncharacteristically thorough fashion that this happened at 4 o'clock, about 4 o'clock, I'm thinking that probably it really happened at about 3 o'clock, and that's why it had to be changed on the arrest report. Now, why this is important to my thesis, that is that Oswald and company were creating an alibi for Oswald here. Why this is important is because, how do I say this? One of the films, whichever one it is, and it's as I've shown, I think the state of the evidence leaves in question which frames come from which film, shows an Oswald who looks like the genuine Oswald, the one arrested, the one that we have the arrest photos from New Orleans. And since I'm saying in my thesis that Oswald was not actually the person arrested, I think it's important the time of the event is important because there may have been two staged events. One with Oswald being arrested, and which wasn't a real arrest, and one with the brown-eyed Oswald being arrested. This guy that we see from the John T. Martin film, perhaps, or maybe it's from the Doyle film, shows apparently the same guy that we all call Oswald. So I think perhaps there was a point to the Doyle film. The point was to reinforce this alibi, that we have an amateur photographer who just happened to be whistling Dixie walking by and took a picture of Oswald being arrested, and lo and behold, it is Oswald. So this is more confirmation that Oswald was indeed arrested. But if there are two separate events occurring at two different times, then you could trick the camera people. They wouldn't know what's going on here. One of them films one event, one of them films another event, one of them films Oswald apparently being arrested, and the other films the brown-eyed guy being arrested, but we don't get to see the brown-eyed guy's face well enough to, or at all, I guess, to make the determination. I don't know if I'm losing you here or not, but I think this altered time of arrest on the arrest report, and the fact that the FBI is saying it was 4 o'clock, it was 4 o'clock, it was 4 o'clock, really, it was 4 o'clock, I think that means that probably there were two arrest events, and maybe somebody of a completely different name. That is maybe Lee Harvey Oswald, using a different name, was arrested at 3 o'clock, and then the brown-eyed Oswald was arrested using Oswald's name at 4 o'clock, and that would be consistent with my thesis. So that's it. I realize this does not prove to a certainty that Oswald's apparent arrest in New Orleans was a alibi so that he could go to Cuba, and if he was spotted in Havana or on the way there, then the FBI would know, of course, it couldn't have been Oswald because he was under arrest. And that's why he wanted to talk to the FBI on Saturday, so he could prove that, hey, here I am, in case they had any doubts. But I think Oswald didn't realize that the FBI already knew what was going on. CIA already knew what was going on. And that I think Oswald thought he was working for the Cubans at this point when he was really working for the Americans. All right, I guess that's the best I can do at the moment.